Our agenda tonight is open with a land acknowledgement and introduction here in just a minute. And then we're going to hear from Kristel Porter on what is the energy revolution. Then we'll be talking about kind of the basic understanding of a ratepayer case with Brian Edstrom from Citizens Utility Board. And then we're going to hear from Bret, Pence on what's happening with the Minnesota Power Ratepayer case. And then we'll hear from Kristel on what's going on with the Xcel Ratepayer case and ways you can get involved with that. So take a moment, if you will, and adopt a posture of reverence and presence, if you will. Take a moment to breathe and let's honor the land that we're all on. Wherever you may be, let's acknowledge that we're on indigenous land. And Minnesota is the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We acknowledge the trauma that's embedded in the foundation of this country, and that the land we reside on came under control of the US through genocide, slavery, and ongoing occupation. We recognize the historical, spiritual, and personal trauma that this involves and the ways this has impacted indigenous communities, communities of color, immigrant communities, and really all of us. And by offering this acknowledgement, we affirm the right of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space here. And we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love. Just a reminder that if you're on this call, you are a CC. We call that, when we name these the CC webinars, that means you're a community connector. You connect us to other people in the movement. You connect us to your faith community or your congregation, or if you don't have a specific institutional faith community, maybe you connect us to your neighborhood or to your geography or to your friend group. And it's you all who help lead the movement. MNIPL has more than 250 connections across the state. We have 85 kind of official community connectors, people who've signed up and said, yes, I want to serve in this role particularly. And just to let you know, community connectors lead your communities to connect with us and the resources we have, and connect us to the movement and to what's going on in the movement. You help us know what's happening in your communities and ways that we can better resource the movement.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone else is. I'm not seeing any slide. I'm just seeing just a white screen, not a slide.
Yeah, me neither. It's all white.
Oh, thanks so much for telling me. Gosh, sure. That's a problem. Let's see if we can fix that. So glad you told me. What do you see at this stage?
Again, just a white, kind of a white screen.
White.
Yeah.
Well, let's start again. Thanks so much for telling me that. Gosh, I'm not sure. It says it's sharing my screen, but
it was sharing, but it just wasn't. The slide wasn't showing up for some reason.
I must have pressed the wrong button. Let's try it again.
You're on now.
How about that? Is that sharing?
Yeah.
Slide deck?
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much, Bret. Thanks for catching me up on that.
It is. It's not in.
Yep.
It's not in the view mode. There you go.
Is it in view mode now?
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks for helping me out there.
Yeah.
So you all are part of this climate movement that MNIPL and other environmental groups, which you may belong to also, are building across the state. And so you are connected to one another, you're connected to us, and that's the strength of the power of collective action across the state. So we hope that we continue to empower you, and if you want to make it official, we welcome you to click this link. I'll drop it in the chat here in just a minute, and you can sign up. If you do that, if you haven't already signed up, and if you do that, you will be sent an email invitation for a call with one of our staff to talk about what your community is and how you'd like to work in it. You'll get these reminders of these webinars that happen. You'll get a monthly action alert that you can kind of cut and paste into your faith community's newsletters or bulletins or whatever forms of communication you use, email and other things. And to the extent that you want it, you'll get support and coaching from MNIPL staff. Reminder that every Thursday at noon, one of our staff, usually me or Terry, is on an open office hour, and you can join with that. You can find the link on our website, but you can also make an appointment at a time that's more convenient with you if Thursdays aren't easy. As a reminder, we will be collecting all the links in the slideshow and sharing those out through email, maybe tomorrow, at least sometime later this week. So you don't have to keep track of all these links that you're going to see tonight to take action. So now I want to get to the real meat of the why you're here tonight, and I want to begin to turn this over to our newest staff member. Welcome here, Kristel Porter. She's our Energy Revolution Manager. She's also the Executive Director of Minnesota Renewable Now. And she's one of the founders of the United Black Legislative Agenda. And she's participated or initiated numerous environmental projects across Cleveland and the Twin Cities, from things like teaching youth about waste streams to organizing BIPOC women into special bicycling rides, to addressing heat islands in North Minneapolis by planting hundreds of trees. She's an environmental rock star, and very excited to have her on the call and turn it over to you, Kristel.
Hey everyone, I'm so glad to be here. So yes, my name is Kristel Porter, and I am so excited to be a part of MNIPL. It's been awesome just getting to know everyone, and I'm excited to get to know each and every one of you over time. So you're probably wondering what an energy revolution manager is and what we do, what an energy revolution is. And basically what an energy revolution is we are basically keeping an eye on things that could be inequitable for ratepayers. And basically, when we see something that is inequitable or unfair, unjust, then we speak up and we connect, we reach out and engage the community. And when we engage the community, we give them a space to have their voice heard. So getting them plugged into different opportunities to make a difference in something that may be going on that is working against them when it comes to being a ratepayer or utility ratepayer. This kind of came out of the Just Solar Coalition. And if you guys are familiar with the Just Solar Coalition, you can actually go forward, Buff. Thank you. This came out of the Just Solar Coalition, and the Just Solar Coalition is basically a group that came out of MNIPL, and it's a combination of different organizations all over. And the Energy Revolution is a partnership between MNIPL and MN Renewable Now. But the Just Solar Coalition, and some of you guys may have come to the Just Solar tour that we hosted a couple months ago. And that is groups that, there's a lot of different groups that are involved. There's Community Power, Sierra Club, MN350. I mean, so many different groups that are involved in this. And the point of Just Solar Coalition is basically expanding community ownership of solar power, creating more opportunities for solar for minority-owned businesses and workers, job training programs, making them more accessible to people who are low income, living in low income communities and communities of color, to eliminate recidivism, providing more community input in any legislation that that has to do with solar, community solar, and workforce development, inspiring those in power to envision and commit to building a sustainable, equitable future. So like elected officials and people who have the ability to pass legislation. And then helping faith communities, of course, to connect their deepest held values with environmental justice. So making sure that they're connected and one and the same. Listening to historically marginalized voices, and that includes, of course, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people living in poverty, lower income, folks that are living on a fixed income, and then, of course, community members reintegrating from incarceration. And I'll dig in more on what we are working on, but until then, I'm going to introduce Brian Edstrom from the Citizens Utility Board. He is actually an attorney who recently returned to the public sector after practicing with Avisen Legal. And Brian enforced securities regulations for the state of Minnesota and was an attorney analyst for the U.S. Justice Department's Consumer Protection Branch. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Kristel, and nice to see you all. Man, it's funny to see that picture of me in a suit. I don't have to wear those quite so often anymore, but really glad to be here and appreciate the invitation to join you all. So as Kristel mentioned, I now work for the Citizens Utility Board, and that is a nonprofit organization that's based in St. Paul. And we focus on consumer advocacy in the energy and utility space, trying to ensure that all Minnesotans have equal access to affordable and reliable and clean energy. So we work closely with a lot of other advocates, including environmental advocates and consumer advocates, as well as folks at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. So it's great to be part of this presentation. And I'm here to give a little bit of an overview of how a rate case works and just kind of how the regulation of utilities works at a high level. Some of you might know some of this, for others it might be brand new. I know for me, coming from a bit of a different sector into the utility space, I was and continue to be amazed at how complex the regulation of investor-owned utilities is. It truly is a complex process. But investor-owned utilities like Minnesota Power and Xcel and CenterPoint are monopolies. They're the only service provider that provides access to gas and electricity in their service territory. So, but they are regulated monopolies, so they are somewhat tightly controlled on how they make decisions and on how they charge ratepayers. But how that works is really complicated and involves a lot of different parties. The main kind of very high level core legal requirement that applies to investor-owned utilities when it comes to rates is that they have the burden to demonstrate to the public and to the regulatory bodies that oversee them that their rates are just and reasonable. And if there's any doubt as to reasonableness, that doubt is supposed to be resolved in favor of the consumer. So that is kind of the core philosophy and actual law set forth in Minnesota statutes that lays the foundation for the regulation of utilities in Minnesota. On the other hand, utilities are also authorized to earn a reasonable return on their services and on their investment in the equipment that is required to provide reliable utility service. And by reasonable return, I mean regulators set a ceiling that they can earn up to. So utilities are for-profit companies. that are, beholden to shareholders and corporate boards, and they're trying to make money. And the way they make money is through rates. So there's a very interesting legal balance that exists in the utility space where, on the one hand, they have to ensure their rates are just and reasonable, and on the other hand, they're trying to earn as high as rates as they can to earn their return. So we exist trying to keep that balance and trying to ensure that shareholders' profits are not prioritized over ratepayers' rates and the just and reasonableness of those rates. The main regulatory body that oversees investor-owned utilities in Minnesota is the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, or sometimes just called the Commission or the PUC. And that is, there are 5 commissioners. They're appointed by the governor. There is usually, there needs to be some balance politically on the commission. So right now there is 1 Republican commissioner, 1 independent commissioner, and 3 Democratic commissioners. They have to be confirmed by the Senate. So that can turn into kind of a political issue if commissioners are perceived as having too much of a political bias. And those commissioners operate in a quasi-judicial function. And by that, I mean, they essentially are 5 judges that make decisions by majority vote. So if a utility wants to make a change to their rates or to their programs, often that requires approval by the commission, and the commission discusses those issues and makes a determination in the public through public hearings and public record development that other parties can participate in. And the central goal of the public utilities is to ensure safe, affordable, and reliable utility service that is in the public interest. So they too are ultimately responsible for that balance of permitting utilities to make the investments they need to earn a reasonable return on their investments and their services, and to ensure that the rates they charge are just and reasonable. And then the Minnesota Department of Commerce also plays a major role in how utilities are regulated and function in Minnesota. They help build the record that informs PUC decisions. So they have analysts and attorneys that file very detailed public comments and analysis on various utility issues, and that helps the commissioners make decisions. So Buff, you can go to the next slide. And so a rate case specifically is one of the more complicated and important determinations or processes that occurs before the Public Utilities Commission. And essentially, whenever a regulated utility wants to raise their rates, they need to have the commission's approval. And in order to seek that approval, they file what's called a general rate case, which is a very detailed, hundreds of pages of documents outlining the various expenses and costs that they incurred, their debt, the things that they anticipate in incurring costs for, what they charge their customers, how those costs are balanced between different customers, like residential customers versus industrial customers. They file all of that in a big public record, and they have multiple expert witnesses provide testimony on how all those things interplay. And then other parties have the opportunity to kind of dissect and analyze and push back on some of the utilities' requests to try to come up with a balanced rate increase that remains just and reasonable and doesn't tip the scales in favor of the utility. We are currently in the midst of a couple of these. Minnesota Power, there is an ongoing rate case right now that CUB has been party to. Xcel has also filed rate cases on their gas and electric services. So it's a really busy time right now in front of the commission. and I offered here in that those sub bullets just kind of very high level overview of the process of how a rate case works. Basically, when a utility files a request to increase their rates with the PUC refers that request to the Office of Administrative Hearings for what's called a contested case proceeding. And that's a legal proceeding similar to litigation that is conducted before an administrative law judge. And it involves the parties pre-filing expert witness testimony. There's a hearing where the parties can cross-examine others' witnesses. And then there's always a public hearing where people from the public can weigh in and either verbally or file public comments on the rate case. And then lawyers for each party submit legal briefs. And ultimately, the administrative law judge issues what are called findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations to the PUC. And basically, that is the administrative law judge reaching kind of an objective determination of their thoughts on the record and what they think is a sort of conclusive statement of the facts and the law applicable, and ultimately recommending what they think the Public Utilities Commission should do. It is just a recommendation. The Public Utilities Commission ultimately has the final say, and but their determination has to be based on the record that is built before the administrative law judge. So that's a mouthful. I'm happy to answer any questions about that now or later. Just two final points on that. So this whole process is a pretty time-consuming process. It takes several months or a year for all of this to be worked out. In the meantime, utilities are permitted to charge what is called an interim rate. They're permitted by the commission to charge an interim rate. And that is sort of an estimate of what the final rates will be, the PUC's estimate of what the final rates will be. And if that interim rate proves to be set too high, then customers will be refunded the difference when final rates are set. If it's too low, they might be surcharged for the difference when the final rate is set. So those of you in Minnesota Power territory or Xcel territory will have seen those interim rates go into effect at the beginning of 2022, and you've already been paying them. And then finally, typical parties that are involved in these rate cases is obviously the utility that is requesting the rate increase, the Department of Commerce that does a detailed analysis on the increase request and files testimony, the Office of the Attorney General, they represent the interests of consumers and small businesses and push back where they think a rate increase might be unfair. And then private and nonprofit interveners that can include a variety of organizations like CUB. Environmental advocates sometimes get involved, though rate cases tend to be more focused on financial issues than environmental issues specifically. Energy Sense Coalition is a low-income consumer advocate, a nonprofit. And then LPI is the large power interveners. They're an active party in these dockets, representing the interests of large industrial customers. So that's the high level overview. I will stop there, but I'm happy to answer questions as they develop. Thank you.
Wow, that was great, Brian. I've never heard it spelled out so clearly and methodically before. Thank you. That was really well done.
Thank you.
Do we have any kind of bread and butter questions for Brian after that kind of explanation there? We're going to get into some specifics with Minnesota Power and with Xcel Energy, but anybody have any particular question for Brian? You can come off mute if you have to, if you need to. Okay, well, it looks like, Brian, you did a great job in explaining that. Everybody's on board with you and got that. So thank you very much. And it's great to work with Citizens Utility Board and be partners with you all in this work together. I want to welcome Bret Pence officially to the call. He's here. He's our Greater Minnesota Director, and Bret organizes our partners and faith communities and networks all across northern Minnesota. He brings a lot of knowledge about energy efficiency and renewable energy and energy policy to his role, because he's worked in those fields before. He worked for Equilibrium 3 and other community energy projects. And Bret is he's also been a wilderness guide and very interesting person. And we're very glad you're on the call here tonight, Bret. And tell us what we need to know about Minnesota Power.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Maybe you could go to the next slide that has the bullet points. Thank you. I'm going to agree with Buff that Brian's overview, that's probably the best 10-minute overview you're going to get of a rate case process in your lifetime. You were witness to history here in terms of that. What I'll talk about just is about the rate case that has just ended up here in terms of the public hearings and the public comments that closed yesterday, and that is on the utility that that Brian referenced a couple times, Minnesota Power. It is, if you own stock in that, you would own stock in Elite. That's its parent company. Minnesota Power is one company within the umbrella, corporate umbrella of Elite, although it is its largest earner. And oftentimes it's hard to tell the difference between Minnesota Power and Elite. So you may have heard it as Elite. We have I just said a little context. We have a very interesting history with this particular utility and involvement with not just rate cases, but all kinds of cases in front of the Public Utilities Commission with this particular utility. In fact, it's kind of how we formed up here. We had a couple of churches, maybe 3 or 4 churches that were undergoing a audits, pilot project energy audits. We started talking together, comparing notes, and we quickly realized that we saw the world and the need for faith and environmental justice was really moving to all of us. We started working together, and the first thing we did was put out a letter asking Minnesota Power to really move into the community solar realm after some legislation passed at the state legislature in 2013. We thought maybe a few churches would sign on and we'd send it to Minnesota Power, and we had over 50 faith communities sign on outside of Duluth, and that was how we said, oh, there's something going on here, and we sought out MNIPL, and we became the first regional network of MNIPL. So you could make the case that Minnesota Power helped us form our regional network up here. So thank you very much, Minnesota Power, for that. We also uniquely, I think we have in the past been involved in these kind of cases, not only getting citizens and faith community members involved in the public process that Brian was talking about within rate cases and with other things, but also we file official comments and became what's called an intervener, so one of those parties. And that's because there's a unique structure and culture in terms of Minnesota Power. Minnesota Power is unique among utilities in that it has about 145,000 customers, but 8 to 10 of those customers use 2/3 of the power. And those are really big industrial customers. The mines, taconite mines up here, and wood mills particularly. You also might lump Enbridge or Line 3 into that category as well. So you can imagine what happens if you're in business and 10 of your customers are buying 2/3 of your product all the time. You're going to serve those customers really, really well. You might not pay attention to the other 144,990 customers as much as they might not be on your radar as much. So we think that that sets a perception within the company and a culture that has passed down over time, where we think there's just a lot of justice issues involved. Typically the rates, they try to have the rates as low as possible for those industrial customers. And then that jacks up the rates for residents and other categories. And we have a high amount of low income residential customers in Minnesota Power's territory. So in northeastern Minnesota. So because of that kind of structural injustice that's built into this particular utility, we've been involved in a lot of rate cases over time, and other cases I'll talk about. In terms of this particular case, it's actually, there's a lot of parallels to what's going on with Xcel. Minnesota Power requested an 18% rate increase. I believe the Xcel, it's a bit more than that. We are under some of these interim rates that Brian talked about. If you live up here and you're a resident, you've seen a 7% increase. If you're a church up here or a faith community that has a building, you've already seen a 14% rate increase. So it's pretty big. We're already paying pretty big cost. Again, we've just kind of finished filing reports. So we're at the stage now where this information that has been collected over this time, the comments and all the filings from other interveners are now being collected by an administrative law judge. But some of the issues that are, I think, most important, and these are going to be similar also, I think, to what you'll see in Xcel, is that Minnesota Power has asked for this big rate increase because they just simply say that they need that for their costs. And that's the revenue requirement bullet that's there. And that is the point of this rate case. This is to see if their proposal and if their case they're making holds water. So in this particular case, I believe the Department of Commerce and the Attorney General's office are basically saying Minnesota Power only needs about half the revenue that they're saying. So obviously there's a big gap there, and we're really interested to make sure that whatever they're charging for a rate increase is justified. As part of that, there's a little line item there called ROE, and ROE is return on equity. So most of the rate increase would be for costs that they're increased costs they're incurring. That's the case they'll make. But they also, in this particular case, and I'll let Kristel talk to Xcel, but Minnesota Power is also asking for an increase on their return on equity, and that's kind of a built-in profit. So in terms of their rates, you're paying for the cost of things, but also in your rates, you're paying for kind of an internal profit that the utility makes, so it can make a reasonable return. Again, remember this balance that Brian was talking about. So in Minnesota Power's case, they make about 8.3 or 8.5, somewhere in there, % return on all, on everything they're doing. So that is kind of loaded profit. Where they actually see that in profit depends on how they manage things and all that kind of stuff. But it's very important to them. So they've asked for a large increase to return on equity. That's a big issue for us at this time, because we are in this really trying time of high inflation. We're finishing a pandemic. We have all kinds of uncertainty in our economy and in our nation, with our health. And we just don't think it's a time where the utility needs to increase its profit margin a whole bunch and then make ratepayers pay for that. So that's something we're really looking at. And then and concerned about. And the last thing that's a contested issue for us is cost allocation. That's the big, with this particular company, that's something that's a perpetual thing we're concerned about with them. Because if they try to lower the costs for these industrial users, it means that the costs can go up very, very drastically. If we have a iron mine go down, not only does it put out some workers there, but everyone's rates could go up, or at least that is the main reason why they're asking for a rate increase right now, is because they've lost some industrial customers. So this is a big deal. In this particular case, they've asked for an 18% rate hike across the board. So even their industrial customers are getting a rate hike at this point. So we are kind of in an unusual position where we are in agreement with the large industrial customers like the iron mines that we really don't want to see this. We want to make sure whatever is moving forward is being done in a fair fashion. So cost allocation is a really big deal up here. This is also connected, and I'll just wrap up by saying the rate cases are often connected to other proceedings or planning mechanisms that go through the PUC. One is called an IRP, and that's a planning document. Basically, the utility has to plan for kind of about 15 years about how much demand they think they're going to have for electricity and then how they're going to generate it. And Minnesota Power is just finishing up an IRP that's, I think final comments are due at the end of the month now. And they really haven't proposed very much in the way of renewable energy. And of course, renewable energy would be one way to decrease cost to ratepayers over time, because renewable energy doesn't use fossil fuels, which is a big cost. So that is a connection there. And the Solar Sense is their version of a solar rebate program. They've really cut the costs of that quite a bit over time. They've cut the amount of funding for it. And so it's really difficult for people to get rebates or have incentives for solar at this point, which of course would be one way for them to manage higher utility costs. So we try to connect these cases together as we're moving forward, and I can talk about those if people have questions later on. So yeah, I'll be here if you have questions about that particular case, but now I think we should turn it over to Kristel and talk about what's going on with the Xcel rate case.
Brett,
Thanks.
just before we switch over to Kristel, could I ask kind of if you're looking at the life cycle of this ratepayer case, kind of what stage are we in at this? How far in are we for Minnesota Power?
Yeah, when you get to the point where they close public comment, you're getting towards the end. So I would defer to Brian to actually know when this is going on, but I would suspect it would be fall or late fall of this year when we might have a decision from the commission. Brian, do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I can chime in a little on that. So I mentioned that all the parties to the case filed briefs. So we just filed reply briefs yesterday, actually, in the Minnesota Power rate case. So then now the administrative law judge will be reviewing all of the briefs and issuing his recommendations. I want to say, I think he's doing that at the end of September, if I remember right. And then there's one more step where parties get to kind of react to the administrative law judge's recommendations, and we can file a response to that. And I think the Public Utilities Commission final decision is either in November or early December this year. I think that's right.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
And Buff, there is one question I can answer before we move on, if you want. It's in the chat.
Please. Yep. Please do.
Sure. It's from Jean, and she's asked just the geographic area that Minnesota Power covers versus Xcel. So Minnesota Power is northeastern Minnesota. That would be, and it is it was not a block of northeastern Minnesota. It is maybe all within northeastern Minnesota, but in fractured. If you looked at a map, it would be fractured areas. So they serve the mines and the mills. So they'll serve kind of the swath of the Iron Range, and they'll serve the city of Duluth, but then they won't serve again to like Moose Lake, or they'll serve Carlton, but not areas in between. So there are these spotty areas all over the state. And the company was created to serve industrial customers. And so where you see spots of industrial activity, they're usually serving that load. So a new paper plant that's proposed out in Cohasset, that's on Minnesota Power territory. Look for where industrial customers are, and it's kind of a spotty place. You could look up, if you really wanted to see a map of that, Gene. Oh yeah, thank you, Xcel. Kristel anticipated my floundering of how to describe that geography, and she's put it in the chat there. So thank you for saving me, Kristel.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brett. We'll turn it over to you, Kristel.
Oh, awesome. That was great, Brett and Brian. I've still got a lot to learn, so I really actually learned a lot. Thank you. So yeah, going on to Xcel's rate case, as you can see, Xcel actually requested last year an increase of 21.2% increase over the next 3 years. I know that sounds hard to believe. 21% increase on any bill is actually not fun news to hear. And right now, actually, customers are currently paying an interim rate of 6.4%, residential customers are. And actually, Xcel had asked for a 9.7% interim increase, but in the PUC reduced that request actually in December 2021. basically saying that residential customers are facing taxing circumstances right now in our current economy. So the PUC has displayed that they understand the special pressures that many customers are facing when it comes to certain effects like COVID has had on our economy. And, you know, even before, just disenfranchised communities as well. Just it's rough, and 21% on any bill. I just can't even imagine being a small business owner and maybe having some walk-in coolers and or running a laundromat and being told that my electric bill is going to raise by 21%. That would probably put me out of business. So the contested case will proceed into the fall. Basically, just like Bret had explained earlier, the contested issues include, you know, revenue requirements. You know, Xcel is a publicly trading company, so they have a certain return that they have promised to their shareholders. And then, of course, infrastructure and transmission lines, you know, building out the grid, and then allocating those costs, and then return on equity. So the Public Utility Commission they're planning to issue the order by June 2023. So there will be, like I said, there's going to be an open, right now there's an open comment period. In October, there will be public hearings. And then in March, there will be a public hearing as well. And then the issue should be ordered by June 2023 if things go as they have planned. If you want to go ahead and switch to the next slide. I just wanted to kind of go over like what current ratepayers issues are currently. So we have been out, the Energy Revolution team has been out in the community, and we've been knocking on doors. And what we've heard is about 80% of the people that we have communicated with, and we have been focusing on the north and south green zones in Minneapolis. And if you know anything about those areas, they happen to have lower area median incomes than anywhere in the Twin Cities. And also a higher, very high unemployment rate, and less access to pretty much everything. So about 80% of the doors knocked, they said that they were behind on their electric bills. Some have expressed that their bills were as high as $800, even over $1,000. I spoke with a man and his wife yesterday who said that they could not increase the temperature in their house above 64 degrees last winter because they simply cannot afford it. So they are actually in their 70s and on a fixed income, and their home needs repairs, and they have a lot of drafts. So that affects their, you know, their gas and their electric utilities. Xcel Energy, when they've asked for that 9%, but the PUC wouldn't allow that 6.4% in January 2022. But, you know, now they're asking for this increase while people are just drastically behind. And then, you know, going into, people say, well, aren't there COVID relief funds? You know, people that were struggling financially were able to access these COVID relief funds. But a lot of people don't know that many people and organizations have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars in federal pandemic relief aid. And so there was a lot of people that weren't able to access those funds that should have been able to. There's actually a very small percentage, I think it's like 9% of what was expected to take advantage of energy assistance. And actually, by some accounts, actually, I found out in Michigan, they had paid nearly $4 billion in fraudulent unemployment benefits. Well, and in California actually paid $20 billion in fraudulent applied for funds. So, I mean, that's a real issue. And, you know, people that are struggling behind on their bills and then not having access to something to bail them out is an issue. If you could switch to the next slide. Great. And so this was actually a article that I read in the CNN Business, and it was actually last month. And I wanted to read this to you. It's basically, I'll just read it out. Even when the temperature soars into the 90s, Linda Morris won't turn on her air conditioning until she feels she's about to faint. Instead, the retired postal worker tries to escape the heat in the unfinished basement of her Hickory Hills, Illinois home. She brought down a chair so she could read there. Morris, 65, already had her power shut off in June when the thermometer in Chicago area hit at least 90 degrees on 7 days. After failing behind on her payments, she was forced to use her savings to settle the nearly $500 tab, which she can't do again since she's on a fixed income after retiring last year. She basically said, "You can't afford to turn your air on anymore. That's very sad," said Morris, who is also staying home more because of the high gas prices. "Any other summers, I will turn my air on, but this summer, it's just way too expensive." If you could switch to the next slide. So where are we now? Currently, the interim rate was set on December 2021. So that is the 6.4% that we are paying. And so I'm sure a lot of you have seen the increase. We've definitely been hearing about it on the streets for sure. People are not happy. And so I can only imagine if the 6.4% is difficult for folks, I can't even imagine what the full 21.2% will do. Currently, the case is with the Office of Administrative Hearings. And right now, we do have an open public comment period. So people can put in a comment now. If you want to click that button another time. The public hearings are coming up. They're going to be October 4th to the 6th. And if you could see there, they're going to be taking place in different places throughout the state. I'm pretty excited about October 4th. That's literally right next door to me, Golden Valley. I live in North Minneapolis. And if you can see October 4th through the 6th, you'll see Woodbury, Red Wing, and St. Cloud. You can also tap into them via Zoom. And we'll make sure that you actually get these links because I can tell you, you probably can see the blue. Those are the links of where those actual locations are. And we'll make sure that you get that after this meeting. I'm going to click to the next. And Brian went over this a little bit, and I'll go over it real quick, but what is the PUC? And basically it is and I wanted you to be able to see what these folks look like. So these are our commissioners. They are 5 judges that are appointed by the governor. Just like Bret said, or Brian said earlier, there are 3 Democrats that are currently appointed onto the Public Utilities Commission. And then there is the independent and a Republican. So, and that could possibly be because we have a Democratic governor right now. And so they do definitely try to mix it up a bit. You can't have all Democrats on the commission. That is not allowed, or all Republicans or independents as well. So, and Xcel's basically their job is to authorize public utilities to recover. Oh, sorry, I went ahead of myself. So the PUC, their job is to basically make sure that the utilities the rates are fair. So they're fair for the ratepayers, and they don't get too expensive and people can actually afford them. And they have a lot of other, responsibilities as well, but that's the one I'm going to focus on for now. Sorry, if you could go forward. What we've done. So this is what we have done so far, and the Energy Revolution team. So far, we have knocked on 467 doors. And out of those 467 doors that we've knocked on, we'd had actual conversations with 75 residents. And a lot of them we dug deep. I mean, some of them we talked for an hour. So if you can only imagine. And then we've got 67 out of the 75 people that we actually directly talked to had signed the petition saying we do not want Xcel to increase our rates by 21%. We just simply can't afford it. If you want to click forward. So now we're basically saying, hey, we want you to join us. We want you to join the Energy Revolution team. And we also want you to get involved. And these are some things that you can do to act. You can, and you will get all of these links. There is a form that you can use to submit a comment to the Public Utilities Commission. It's a simple form that you can either print out, or if you have access to PDF, where you can fill it out on your computer, and then you can mail it to that address, and you can also email it to that email, or fax it. And then another way is you can e-file it, and you can create an account on eDockets, which we also have that link there. And you can create your own account and then file it electronically. And you can also attend a hearing. And of course, we have links to that as well, so that you can sign up to attend that. And that can be on your calendar, so you don't forget, because I know if it's not on my calendar, I'm most likely not going to be able to make it. If you want to click forward, that'd be great, Bob. Thank you. And then again, we would love for you to join the Energy Revolution team. There's different ways that you can get the word out to your community. I'm sure, your place of employment, your place of worship, the schools that your children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews attend. I'm sure that a 21.2% rate increase would mean having to possibly let go of an employee. And so getting the word out is very crucial in order to make sure that this does not happen. And so one of the things that you can do is you can host your own Energy Revolution party at your home, have a little barbecue in the backyard. In my neighborhood, we have a potluck every fourth Friday. So I'll be doing that with my neighborhood. And then you can do something like this, having a webinar, or meeting people after church and having coffee, or at your place of work, or any clubs, like if you are a part of a book club or a yoga club or anything like that. It really wouldn't take much time, probably a 15 to 30 minute discussion, let people know, and make sure that we have all of the things that you would need to be able to share with people, so they can actually put in a comment and attend a public hearing. And then attend meetings to plan for actions. So we have meetings monthly. The Energy Revolution team meets on the fourth Wednesday of every single month. And then you could also attend one of our upcoming outreach events, and that will be August 17th and August 21st. We're actually going to be meeting behind Redeemer Lutheran Church in North Minneapolis off of Glenwood Avenue. There's a beautiful space back there, a very large field with 5 picnic tables. And we will gather, and our Youth in Power will actually be leading a training on how to reach out to the community about these issues. And we will actually participate in an actual door knocking event. So you'll get paired up with somebody, and we'll go out and knock on 25 doors each. And we'll have some food and some sharing, and just hanging out and having a good time and enjoying each other's company afterwards. And then, of course, we also door knock weekly. We door knock on Tuesdays and Saturdays through September 1st. So you can always feel free to join us in the Youth in Power team. We usually have about 12 to 15 people out there. It's a really good time. And we make a big impact when we are able to reach out and get people to sign the petition. So if you're interested, we do have a link where you can fill out the form to join the Energy Revolution team. And at the very least, if you can attend these things, at least you will be tapped into things that are coming up, so that if you can join, you can on a day that you're free, or if you want to take advantage of the information that we're sending out. So you can even just copy, click, and paste it into your social media to let people in your community know as well. So it's good to even fill out the form if you just want to be updated on the things that are moving with this case. And I see that Todd Pearson is on the call, and I saw that you joined the Energy Revolution team. So I wanted to thank you so much for doing that as well. So yeah, that is about, I believe that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to just take yourself off mute and just chime in.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kristel. I would like to open it up to questions for Kristel and also for Brian and Bret. And if you want to drop those in the chat, you're welcome to. Or as Kristel said, you can just take yourself off mute or raise your hand, or however you like. We're a small enough group. I think everybody can just toss questions in. Well, I've got a question for you, Kristel. What's it been like door knocking the last few weeks? Do people have any idea that this is going on and how it's going to impact their life? Or are they in the dark, or are they know that it's happening and they're concerned? Or what's your experience been?
I would say about 100% of the people that we've talked to did know that this was happening. We are targeting a couple neighborhoods that, like I said, they are in the north and south green zones. So these are folks that are struggling financially. They are behind on their bills, not just the utility bills, but rent. And they're struggling. And if you could see the face expressions on people when we say Xcel is proposing a 21.2% rate increase, I mean, their jaws drop to the floor. They're like, oh my God. When one woman told me that her electric bill, her Xcel bill was currently at $1,200, I couldn't believe it. And to be honest, I just thought she's struggling so hard to catch up. She mentioned that she doesn't qualify for energy assistance because she falls under that situation where she makes too much money, but she doesn't make enough to pay her bills. And so rent is just so high right now. The property values have, skyrocketed in our communities. And we are, like I said, we're in the north and south green zone, but the neighborhoods have gentrified dramatically. And so that means that the property values have increased drastically. And that means the property taxes have increased. And so therefore the rents have increased. And so a lot of people are just barely making it. They're just barely paying the rent. And I just can't imagine somebody having a utility bill that's over $1,000 and trying to play catch up. And at the same time, the utility company increasing their bill moving forward. So it's been really interesting. And I will say that we've got a lot of people that are like, sign me up. They want to get out and knock on doors as well. They're telling people. We've had people, when we told them, they were like, hey, and then they yelled at the people in the back of the house, like, come here, did you know? And like it really just did really catch them by surprise.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Jean, go ahead.
I have a related question. And so in the knocking on doors, what are you hoping, how are you engaging people? Like, what are you asking them to do, or what can they do? Submit a public comment and showing up at a hearing. I mean, both of those things, I just looked at the form for submitting a public comment, and wow, that's like long and intimidating. And so like, how are you providing people options for acting to oppose this outside of these two rather, very formal and rather intimidating steps?
That is a lovely question, Jean. Thank you so much. And we talked about that when we first planned to do this outreach. And that was one of the things that came up, and we were like, the average person isn't even reading the news in these neighborhoods. They are basically just getting by day to day, and let alone feeling like they can, communicate and connect with the Public Utility Commission. So we provided, we have a petition, and we make sure that we give them an opportunity to sign the petition. We have an online link, and we also have an in-person paper petition. So this gives people the ability to sign the petition right there, or they can scan the QR code and sign the petition later, if they wanted to review the petition and read through it first and sign it later. So that gives them an opportunity, and then we will be taking those signatures forward and providing those to our commissioners as well. And then another thing that we're doing, and so these events that are coming up this August 17th and the 21st, we will have and we're inviting all of the people that we've door knocked to these events, and we will have a videographer that's there. So you don't have to just fill out a form and submit a public comment, but you can also record a video of talking, which is very, very helpful. And we've been telling people, like, record yourself, with your cell phone, but we'll have a videographer there on site to record residents, their feelings and how this is going to affect them. We're also going to record people who have come to do community engagement and want to tell another person's story. Like, hey, just like the story I was able to mention about the man and his wife who literally can't turn up the heat for more than 64 degrees, and they're living on a fixed income, and they're in their 70s. Me being able to tell that story about a conversation that I had with my neighbor, that can be recorded. And what's really nice is our videographer will actually edit that down to make it presentable, and then provide that video with that person so they can choose to submit that video themselves instead of us doing it for them. Those are a couple different ways that people can engage.
Fantastic. I think John Binda had a question, and then we'll go to Peter Berglund. Or John, if you want to come off mute, if you've got one. Okay, we can go to Peter. Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
You might have touched on this and I missed it maybe, but when you try to figure out the question of a reasonable increase, to cover the utilities expenses and then to provide a little profit for the shareholders, I wonder if there's a way to look at that in a kind of a rear view mirror. And by that, I mean, if an increase is granted, but then the profits to the shareholders, go up, a real high amount, could you look back and say, wait a minute, your cost of materials must not have gone up that much because there's this huge profit for the shareholders?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I will say this, Peter. Last year the CEO of Xcel brought home $22 million, just him alone. So I don't know, but maybe Bret or maybe one of you guys could,
or Brian. Yeah, you want to
chime in, or Brian chime in on this.
Go ahead, Brian. I'd like to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I honestly I haven't been doing this long enough to know if that happens, if a utility can be forced into a rate case in order to lower their rates. I'm not sure how that process works, but I will say, like Kristel said, there have been some reports in recent years about the CenterPoint CEO as well making huge profits. We at Cub I wrote a kind of long research paper on how CenterPoint made a bunch of money through a corporate merger involving a gas pipeline company that made a bunch of money off of that big Texas winter storm in 2021. So there are frustrating things that happen at utility companies where they do make a lot of money, and the corporate officers there make a lot of money, and it feels very unfair. Some of that, like a big company like Xcel or CenterPoint, they have multiple sort of subsidiaries and operating arms of their company that generate revenue. It's not only the Minnesota utility. And so it gets complicated in the sort of corporate structure. And but I mean, it's a great question, and it is a really frustrating reality of that whole regulated monopoly structure where shareholders and executives of utilities tend to do, in my view of it, pretty well. Well, a lot of us are struggling with these rates that have been going up a lot in recent years. Bret, I'll let you weigh in too.
Well, you did. I think you both did great. I think I just add to all that what is just and reasonable is a perception. And if you want the commissioners to understand what you think just as reasonable is, you need to articulate that. And this is one place where one voice can make a really big difference. Many voices can make a really big difference. And this is a place in your comments where Peter, if you are offended that I'm not familiar with Xcel as much as I am with Elite or Minnesota Power, but I know, for instance, Elite Minnesota Power has, they've guaranteed their shareholders dividends, X amount of dividends for years on end, right? So we had people write comments that said, listen, how can you guarantee these dividends not knowing what the market's going to do, and then just jack up our rates, because you're increasing these dividends. So just in a reason, the commissioners want to hear from you so they understand where just and reasonable is. It's up to us to kind of draw that line and point out injustice to them in some ways.
Yeah, that's very, very true, actually. I was speaking with one of the commissioners last year, actually, when I was at a conference in Duluth, Kate Sieben, and she mentioned that, and she said it, she expressed it like 3 different times. She's like, oh, and this was with the Xcel Energy IRP. She said, I was just so thrilled that we heard from you guys as much as we did. It was so helpful that you made your comments and you stuck to it and you showed up and you let us know, that these issues, because she's like, if we don't hear from you, then we're not able to represent you in the way that we need to represent you. So they really do want us to make comments. I mean, to be honest, like most people don't even know that there is a Public Utilities Commission. We're so focused on our council members or our mayor or president, we don't realize that that's a whole body that we have access to that we just don't. If we knew that we had access to it and we knew how to have access to them, we could actually make a big difference just by simply putting in comments. And what would that look like if, you have a body that has usually not hearing from people, ratepayers at all. They're usually just hearing from the utility companies themselves. And they all of a sudden get a flood of messages, 200 emails or letters or comments on a particular case. I mean, what difference would that make? It makes a huge difference.
That's great. Well, I want to be respectful of people's time. We're winding down. I think we've got time for another question. John Benda, I think you had a question. Do you want to come off mute and ask that?
I hesitate to go here, but I'm going to, just because I've been listening for an hour and all on board with all of you, but a little frustrated. Brian, I first want to commend you for a very understandable summary of how the whole system works. My question is, first of all, and then a comment, to get to larger numbers of people. And I was part of the initial Minneapolis climate action going door to door about solar 6-7 years ago, and it was a wash. We just couldn't get enough people. So now they're doing better with that. But I'm wondering about the idea of, and I come from a community concern perspective. I'm a clinical social worker, but I have a master's degree in ecology and ethics. And I've been doing a paper with a guy and going to do an ecumenical presentation to several church members from different faiths who are otherwise incommensurate. Conservative, liberal, don't agree on anything except 3 things, which we're finding out is what we can get them together to talk about. One of them being equity and justice issues around nature and ecology. The only other thing they'll talk about is how do you love your neighbor as well as yourself? And, you know, how do you treat other people the way you want to be treated? The rest of it is all dogma. They may or may not agree on, for better or worse, but we can get people to talk about the sacredness of nature and equality and justice, no matter what faith they're coming from. So my question is, how do we get to larger numbers of people about this issue, about something as specific as a rate hike that's totally unjust? And you got congregations, and they're not in North Minneapolis, but you got congregations. Mount Olivet Lutheran Church is the largest Lutheran church on the planet. There's like 10,000 families. If you could even get in there, or one of us, to talk to the congregation via the pastor who's interested in this kind of thing, and give talks to large numbers of people with a version of Brian's summary, and educate people about what's happening to them behind the scenes, and then include them from whatever faith, interfaith, a more contemporary word than ecumenical. But if that's the take on it and where you're coming from, I think you could reach larger numbers of people by actually getting in front of the congregations and saying, will you sign this while you're here? We got a table in back. I just wanted to say that because it's really frustrating to get anything done without more numbers. And I'll
Well,
stop
thanks,
there.
John. Thanks for that comment. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, John. And this is where that, and this is where filling out that form to be a part of the Energy Revolution team doesn't mean you have to come to all the meetings, doesn't mean you have to, but what we want to do is make sure that you have the tools that you need to do the outreach. I mean, we have 14 people on this call right now. If each of you were able to get 10 people to spread the word, or if each of you were able to tell your congregation or tell your place of work, that would spread the word, and we will be able to provide you with the tools that you need to be able to spread that word so that you can connect people to all of the different ways to be able to reach out and speak up and have their voice heard. So I agree with you. You know, keep in mind those 470 doors that we were able to get to. This was just 11 youth, you know, and just imagine if each one of you were able to go back to your place of worship or your job or your children's or grandchildren's or niece's school and be able to spread that word. And I always say school because, you know, I've served on a couple site councils for schools, and I keep bringing this up. Anytime that, you know, each school has a budget and how much they can spend every single year. And anytime, I have never seen it. And in many of the years that I've served on a site council for a school, I've never seen a 21% increase on a utility or a bill for that school. But I guarantee that if there was a 21% increase, that there would definitely be a teacher that would have to be let go. There would have to be a program that would have to be let go. So when people want to downplay how much little it's going to be per resident, let's think about the small businesses. Let's think about the churches. Let's think about the places that use a lot of energy and what that would mean to them. So, and I'll just leave it at that, but please fill out the form and so that we can actually get that information to you so that people can do their due diligence and reach out to their places.
Yeah, and John, I'll add to that 70 people signed up for this call tonight. I know it's also night to night, so maybe not everybody was able to show up in person, but we will be sending out the recording. As Kristel said, we'll be sending out all those links by email with all of you who signed up and with all those 70 who signed up. So, you know, expect some growth in this campaign out of all those folks. I want to be respectful of people's time and begin to draw this to a close. Say thanks a lot for joining us tonight. And I want to remind you that we do these each the first Tuesday of every month, and that next first Tuesday is September 6th. We'll be at 7 o'clock. We heard from a lot of people through a listening project that we did that community connectors want to meet each other. They want more interaction with one another. And so we're going to have a kind of a virtual happy hour. We'll do some highlights from that report that we got from the listening project. and we'll provide some virtual space for people to talk to one another and get to know one another in all the different contexts and faith communities that you're in. So hopefully you'll join us next month for that. So thanks, a special thanks to Kristel, to Brian, to Bret for being our speakers tonight. And please sign up for those on those links and support this ratepayer case. Thank you.
Thank you all.